Imagine you're on a flight, a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, and you look outside the window and you see the top of Mount Everest just a few feet away. Well, that's what we're going to do today on our flight from Nepal to Tibet. Welcome to another episode of Virtual World Tours, where we take you around the world virtually, helping you visualize places you've never seen before, bringing you interesting facts and stories along the way. Today we are taking off from Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu, Nepal, and we are headed to Lhasa, Tibet in Gangar Airport. So we are using Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 for this flight. I've got my Xbox controller hooked up to my computer, which is how I'm controlling everything. Today we're flying an Airbus A320. Now this is one of the most popular commercial airliners, and there is some disinformation out there that planes do not fly over the Himalayas. There's a video about it with millions of views, but that's actually incorrect. I did a lot of research. There have been regular flights from Kathmandu to Lhasa, which flies right over the Himalayas and right by Mount Everest, as we will see. Without further ado, buckle up your seatbelts and let's get ready to fly. So we're going to move to the external view because it's just easier to see everything. I myself went to Kathmandu and Nepal and hiked to the Mount Everest Base Camp a few years ago, so I'll be sharing some of my own stories along our trip. I do have fond memories of Tribhuvan Airport when I flew in there. They gave free beer to everybody on the plane, and it was like a party with a bunch of Nepalis as I arrived, which was a lot of fun. Certainly when I arrived in Kathmandu, it was my first time in Asia and my first time in the Indian subcontinent, so it was certainly a culture shock. It's a really different sort of part of the world if you've never been there. Kathmandu is situated in the Kathmandu Valley. You know, there's always the valley before the big mountains that we're going to head towards over there. But we're going to take a little circle here and see a couple of landmarks. I stayed with a local family, a local Airbnb in Nepal, in Kathmandu, before my trek. You know, I was talking to them. I was so excited to go to Mount Everest. And I had asked them if they had ever been, and no one in the family had even been to the mountains. And I remember one member of the family said something pretty astute. He said, you know, when it's in your own backyard, you don't care as much. And I thought about that, and it's really true. If a famous landmark is kind of in your own city, you tend not to care as much as one that's, you know, in a faraway land that you had never been before. So first up is Durbar Square, which you can kind of see down below us. I'll include a picture. It's a UNESCO heritage site. It's also where the royal palace is. So Nepal was a monarchy up until 2008, and now they are a parliamentary democracy. And then coming up here is kind of the central area of Kathmandu, a little bit west of the airport. It's just the tourist district. They haven't built out great visuals for Kathmandu in this game yet, but I'm sure they will do that in the future. And then finally, as we head out, you'll see down here to the right is where Buddhanath is, and that is a famous Buddhist shrine. I'll include a picture of it in the video. It's not really rendered well yet in the game. And as we leave Kathmandu, a couple of my favorites of this city. My favorite place was the Monkey Temple. A couple of monkeys tried to jump me and steal my backpack. It's fun to interact with them, but you got to be careful. And then my favorite food was the momos, so that's the Nepali dumplings. Oh my gosh, I ate so many of those. I'll put a picture of that on the screen. You know, I think it's a traditional dumpling, but it's so good. But yeah, let's begin to elevate now and head into the biggest mountain range in the world, the Himalayas. So as we elevate into the mountains, I just wanted to give a little bit of information about Nepal, the country. So the name Nepal, I think there's a couple of old meanings, but it literally means either base of the mountains or sacred place. And that makes perfect sense because of where it's situated, right along the Himalayas, which stretch across the entire country. And also, when you kind of know the Buddhist influence, it's the only country that doesn't have a square flag. And, you know, Nepal is a place that teaches us you can't have everything. It is notoriously one of the poorest countries in Asia, maybe only behind North Korea. But then it also has 8 of the 10 tallest mountains in the world. So obviously, many people travel to Nepal to see these mountains, which we'll see here in a minute. Now, I mentioned Buddhism because you can't really escape it. In the mountains, in the trek to Everest, it's especially prevalent. You see a lot of monks, both in Kathmandu and in other places. You see a lot of monasteries. You see the prayer flags. For those of you who don't really know the principles of Buddhism, a lot of it has to do with kind of letting go of desire in order to remove suffering from your life, finding peace. And Tibetan Buddhism is, of course, led by the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, of course, has been exiled from Tibet, where we are heading since 1959 for political reasons. And the Dalai Lama has a Twitter account, so I wanted to share one of the things he says that kind of reflects the attitude that Buddhists have. So honest concern for others is a key factor in improving our day-to-day lives. When you're warm-hearted, there's no room for anger, jealousy, and insecurity. A calm mind and self-confidence are the basis for happy and peaceful relations with each other. So if you're out there today and you're suffering because you lost someone or you lost something in your life, just know that that desire to have that thing back may be the thing that's causing your suffering, and that you might need to let go and be free of those thoughts. If you can't be free of those thoughts, maybe you should plan a trip into the Himalayas. It's a very peaceful place. So that honest concern for others is not just an attribute of Tibetan Buddhism. It's also reflected in the Nepali culture as well. When I was there, I read some historical folk tales, and I wanted to share one with you now. So it's time for Nepali Stories, a folk tale about selfishness. There was an older rich man whose wife died, and he had become a widower. He decided to share his wealth with his 2 sons and their families, and they promised to take care of him. They treated him well. He split time between the 2 sons' houses, and he spent his life in leisure and mostly in comfort. But then, about a year later, things began to change. His sons and their wives began to serve him stale food. And when he asked for something, he had to wait a long time for it. Eventually, his sons started to ignore him, and his grandchildren even became rude. The man was surprised and sad by this. Why was this happening? So the widower decided to consult his good friend in town, the village priest, about what was happening. The priest was sad for his friend, and having a keen sense for the human spirit, understood what was happening. Now that the sons had nothing more to gain from their father, they decided to mistreat him. The priest suggested a plan. Obtain a chest, fill it with heavy rocks, lock it, and guard it inside your room, as though it had something very valuable in it. The more the widower thought about this idea, the more he thought it was a good idea. And so a little while later, he obtained a chest, filled it with rocks, locked it in his room with a key, and began guarding it. The next night, he was invited down for dinner and declined, said he wanted to fast. And the family ran up to investigate. Why was he guarding this chest? There had to be something valuable in it, surely. When it came time for him to spend time with his other son, he had his son help him lug the chest to the other house. This son, too, became intrigued. Suddenly, both sons began to wait on their father. They began to serve him the best meals possible, and the grandchildren began to be courteous and attentive to the widower. He lived in great comfort for several years until eventually, of old age, he passed away. And when he died, the sons opened the chest and, to their surprise, found just a lot of heavy rocks. And for a minute, they were upset about their father. But then they thought, well, it was their own behavior that had driven him to this action. And the widower had taught his sons a life lesson in selfishness that they would never forget. We've gained a lot of altitude here, and we are coming up on Mount Everest. It's the highest peak. You can see there to the right. But we are going to fly the same way that you would trek into the mountains, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about that trek. So you can kind of arrange your travel in Kathmandu. I used a travel agency, and I actually hired a Sherpa to join me on a 20-day trek up to Everest Base Camp and around the mountains. Definitely worth it, as he kind of knew everything about the area. Subai, shout out to you. I'll see you one day again in Nepal. But the first place that you fly into is Lukla, which is actually one of the world's most dangerous airports. And you can fly in and out of that in this game. Now, with an A320, it's not possible, such a commercial jet. But let's pause the game here, and I'll show you what it looks like in this game. Here's Lukla, where you would fly into in order to go start your trek up to Everest Base Camp. Beautiful place. Obviously considered one of the world's most dangerous airports. You can see the incline there as you arrive at Lukla Airport, and then to take off. Very frightening, as hopefully you have enough speed to glide into the area. One important thing to know about hiking to Everest Base Camp is just acclimatizing to the altitude. You don't want to go too fast, but the trails are really well marked, and they're usually never too steep, so pretty much anyone can do it. So if you really set your mind to it, you can do it. I think it's just grueling because you're in the mountains for so long and you have to go slow. You can't do it all in one run, but I think it's definitely worth it, and a pretty safe hike, to be honest with you. But altitude is where people get in trouble. I stayed a few days at about 17,000 feet after I made it to base camp, and I ended up getting sick. Don't eat yak burgers when you're up there, okay? What a stupid thing to eat. After you would fly into Lukla, you would hike for a couple of days, and you would make it up to Namche Bazaar. Now, Namche Bazaar is the biggest city in the area. Really beautiful city. I'll put a picture up of it. This is kind of where you can acclimatize and hang out for a couple of days. Again, beautiful city in the mountains, and you can see over here the trails that you would hike to get a view of Everest. So Everest is right over here. I'll try to put a little pointer to it. I'll also show you the real life picture of what this angle looks like. And then you can continue. I'm going to have to gain some speed here in order to actually make it over the top of this mountain. So you end up staying at different tea houses on the way. They call it tea house trekking, so you're never really actually camping unless you wanted to. But there's tea houses on the way that will serve you food, and you can just kind of hang out with other travelers. So trekking to Everest Base Camp and actually climbing Everest, two totally different things. I think only about 10,000 people have climbed Everest ever. First in 1953 was Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, and there's only a couple of times per year where you can end up climbing. I'll end up showing you the routes that people climb as well in this game, but for now, let's see if we can get enough altitude. Now, this is not the exact route that a passenger jet would this flight would actually fly by Everest. I'm kind of doing an ad hoc thing here, but I need to get up to 29,000 feet pretty quickly here. I don't know if it's going to be possible. Let's see what I can do. So down here you have the Khumbu Glacier, and then you have Lhasa as the other tall peak. You have other peaks back here like Ama Dablam and others. So this area of the world has some of the highest peaks in the world, over 8,000 meters, over 28,000 feet, which is just incredible. I don't know if we're going to be able to get there. Might be able to get there in time to fly over Everest, but we're heading right for it. Let's see if we can do this. Can't even see the top here, but that's what it would look like if you were in the plane. Ooh, I'm stalling out here. This A320 may not be able to handle it. I might get there though. Maybe not. Damn it. I'm stalling out. Stalling out. the China Eastern Airlines here. Probably not happy with. Man, I'm gonna make this really close. I mean, I think in this game it's actually a little bit shorter than it should actually be, but no, I'm not gonna make it. I'm gonna have to. Yep, this isn't good, folks. Should have turned earlier. Alright, so welcome back. The first time didn't work out too well, but we've got plenty of height now, and we got plenty of airspeed too. So although our airspeed's dropping, I don't think we're going to have any problem to just make it over Mount Everest. You see here the beautiful Himalayas. Now again, Everest I think is about 29,029 feet. It grows I think a few millimeters per year. So who knows if we, in 100 million years it could be a lot higher. But there it is. Looks like we're going to make it over the top. You see I'm at about 30,000 feet. So imagine seeing this as you look out the window. There it is, the top of the world, ladies and gentlemen. So let me enter showcase mode now and show you, before we enter into Tibet, what it looks like to climb Everest. So if I was on the correct plane route, this is what it would have looked like to fly by Everest if I didn't deviate a little bit. So while most people go through Nepal to climb Everest, half of Everest, this side of Everest, is actually in China, in Tibet. And of course, that means Everest acts as a dividing line between two countries. And pretty quickly here, I never got to the other side of Everest. I never have been to Tibet. But pretty quickly here, you can see we begin to descend in elevation. And we enter into the Tibetan Plateau. Now, we don't descend too far in elevation because the Tibetan Plateau is the biggest plateau in the world. Very unique place. The average elevation is about 15,000 feet. Lhasa, the capital, which we're headed towards, I believe is one of the highest cities in the world where people live. Of course, you have the whole political dynamic with the Dalai Lama used to kind of being the spiritual leader and political leader of Tibet. Dalai Lamas have been around for centuries, but of course when China annexed Tibet as a part of China, the Dalai Lama left and hasn't been back since. Now, traditionally the West is on the side of Tibet and having its own autonomy, whereas if you are native to China, you might think that Tibet is rightfully a part of China. I dated a Chinese woman last year who said, quote, China and the Chinese government acts as a big tree, and Tibet enjoys the shade under that big tree, and it all goes together. So she certainly was on one side of the political opinion, but most on the West would say that China abuses its authority in trying to take autonomy away from the area. So I say, let the Dalai Lama return home. Let the Panchen Lama free. He was kidnapped 25 years ago. He was just a kid. And now this video is banned by the Chinese government. So we were now entering a flyover of Lhasa. Now, this is, again, one of the highest cities in the world. I don't think the game has rendered it really well, but they have rendered one place, which we'll fly by here, Palazzo Palace, which is a very historical site. I believe kind of where I believe the 5th Dalai Lama built it in the 17th century. So that's it for the virtual world tour today from Nepal to Tibet. Thanks for joining me. Please subscribe. Please let me know where you'd like for me to go next. And let's see if I can actually stick this landing, which in this game is kind of difficult. But you know, I really want to go to Lhasa, so let's turn off the engines here and see if I can make some sort of landing. Woo! That was pretty damn good. Oh, let's not skid up the runway.